You're listening to the Shared Security Podcast with Tom Eston and Scott Wright, exploring the trust you put in people, apps, and technology.
Hosted by Scott Wright, the Streetwise security coach, and Tom Eston, penetration tester and ethical hacker. And sponsored by Security Perspectives, your source for tailored security awareness training and assessment solutions. We bring you stories, advice, and tips to help you make better risk decisions because nobody else can make them for you.
Episode 59, The Walls Have Ears. Lots of ears that can order merchandise, sometimes when you don't expect them to.
Hello and welcome to the Shared Security Podcast for January 11th, 2017. I'm Scott Wright here with Tom Eston. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great. I can't believe it's 2017 already.
It is now 2017. Despite our efforts to try and get one in December, we were not successful.
Failed epically.
Yeah. So, oh well, we do our best. That's all anyone can ask of us.
That's right. That's right. It was busy.
Yeah.
Busy in December.
Yep.
At work.
So it's your year end for your business, I guess, right? So.
Yeah. It's also my team's busiest time of year is Q4. So if for some reason, right before the holidays, it seems to just really pick up, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But
Not to mention shopping.
that's right.
Other things you had to do.
Right. Yeah.
So, well, that's all behind us now.
That's right.
As
the new year.
It's a new year. We have some new resolutions for the podcast, don't we?
Yes, to record on a regular basis was number one,
Yes.
and actually we're gonna do I think a little bit more interviews this year.
We always say
had talked
that.
about that.
We always say
Yeah,
that.
we did, but we're gonna do it this year.
We're
So,
really going to do it this year. So,
That's right.
Anyway, if anybody
Yeah.
wants to talk to us, let us know.
Yeah,
Yeah. The problem is we just don't get a lot of time to dig around for people to talk to. We'd love to speak with people in just about any area and see how security and technology is affecting you these days.
Yep.
So, absolutely. We'll just put our plug in right now for how to contact us. Why don't we do that?
there it is.
It's,
Feedback at sharedsecurity.net or on Facebook or on Twitter.
Yep.
Or
Yep. Facebook is Shared Security and Twitter is Shared
Shared
Sec.
Sec.
Yep. And,
Yep.
And we have a phone number in case you're old school. It's 613-693-0997. You can leave us a voicemail. So, well, that brings us to our lengthy list of fun topics for the week or the month.
yeah,
or
we
the
don't have
year.
a huge list, but I think we've got some interesting topics this time around. I think we're going to start by talking about our friend Amazon Alexa, the virtual assistant, right?
Yeah, but we have to be careful not to say it in a certain way that it actually sets off people's devices.
Yeah, we got to be careful because these things are hot right now, and they are definitely the hot gadget of the year. So we do got to be careful because we'll talk about that of why you should be careful and others should be careful as well around summoning your new virtual assistant.
And leaving it in a state that perhaps other family members might be able to expertly exploit it, even if they're only 5 or 6 years old.
That's right. Well, I do have one. It's actually in a box right now. I believe it arrived today. So I bought one for science, Scott. So
You're taking one for the team. You're gonna.
I am.
Yeah.
like I said, for science. Yep.
Good.
So we'll have my review in the next podcast, right?
Awesome. That's great. And in general, in that same sort of theme, there is a lot of concern about what companies like Google are doing with our audio environment as we speak.
That's right. Yeah, just the virtual assistants in general. So not just Amazon, but Google and Google Voice and all of those things that you use to to summon different tasks, and of course it's very convenient to do that, but sometimes it causes a little bit of privacy concerns. So we'll talk about some of those things.
Yeah, and if you get really tired of all this stuff at home, you can go and take a cruise.
Yes, you can take a cruise with your new Carnival medallion that has just been recently announced. So we'll talk about how It's nothing really new. There's been other companies like the one with the giant mouse down in Florida. You may have heard of Disney World
Yeah.
that have something similar for many years. But we'll talk about this.
Yeah. And then when you
see
come
different-
back from your cruise and you look at your Netgear router, you're going to find that it's hopefully not misbehaving for you.
Yeah, you may want to update your router. We've talked about router security in the past, but I wanted to bring this one up as a good recent example of a particular vulnerability, but also how, in some ways, the media can overblow some types of announcements. So we'll dig more into that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Router security.
Router security, and if you don't have a Netgear router, you're not out of the woods, because you may have a D-Link router, which a D-Link router might actually be a worse thing for you at this point, because the Federal Trade Commission has come down pretty hard on D-Link for some questionable security practices, it looks like.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. We'll see what comes of that one.
And then for some good news, we'll close off with a cool new tool, I believe.
Yeah, we'll talk about EFF's Privacy Badger browser plugin, something that I recommend everybody install, and we'll talk about why you should do that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting name. Where'd they come up with that? Badger.
I'll have to ask the EFF about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go back to the beginning and look at Amazon and seeing what's going on with their Alexa at CES.
Yeah. So we put a couple links in the show notes on this one. I'm sure you've heard all the news. It's all over the media if you watch the local news, and if anybody still watches TV. It's definitely a hot topic right now is Amazon's Alexa virtual assistant. It actually goes by two names I've seen. One is called Echo, which is their original product, which is basically the virtual assistant with the built-in speaker. So it's kind of like a long tube, which has the built-in speaker. And then there's the Amazon Echo Dot, which is the smaller version without the speaker, but you can connect it to, like a Bluetooth speaker or plug it into your home
so it will
stereo
actually
system.
play sound as well.
Correct. Yep.
Cool.
So, and there's a pretty big price difference in the two. I believe the Echo is like about $200, whereas the Dot is only $49, $50. So, a lot more affordable. And I think the lower price point is really making these devices just as popular as they are, because it's I'm not sure how it compares to Google Home from a pricing perspective, but it definitely is the.
Maybe we should do a little segment on comparing them at some point, just to.
That would be interesting. Yeah, maybe I have to buy a Google Home for science as well.
And when you mentioned the name Dot, I thought, doesn't Amazon have something called not the Dash, is it, or is there?
Yes, they do. We talked about that on the podcast.
Yeah,
actually.
so there's a Dot and a
Dash
and an Echo. Is that supposed to create some kind of a new taxonomy or a new word environment for us? Like
it's
dots and
good
dashes?
marketing. Yeah, it's very good marketing. The Dash button is that button that you can just put all over your house. So when you need like new paper towels, you just press the Dash button, and it automatically orders it from Amazon.
Right.
And it shows up at your door 2 days later. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we covered that in a past one. That's right.
Yep. So the thing with the Amazon virtual assistant, it's gotten a lot of media attention lately. It's definitely a very popular product, but there's also been a couple interesting, I'd say, privacy side effects that have happened with just this technology and how easy it is to use. Well, it's also very easy to order things and sometimes order things without your knowledge, or order things without you even having a chance to stop the order, as we've seen in a couple cases. One was, I don't think we have it here in the notes, but there was a TV news program, and they were discussing just some of the features with Alexa. And so how you summon your Alexa is you say Alexa, and then you say a statement or a question, you ask it something. They actually said, Alexa, order a dollhouse. And it actually ordered everybody that was listening to that TV show some of their Alexas actually went off, and in one case, this little girl had a dollhouse delivered to her that had an Alexa.
I actually thought it was the other way around. I thought they were doing a news
Was
story
it?
about the little girl who had accidentally ordered a dollhouse because she said she wanted to play and said, Alexa, I want to play a dollhouse or something. And it ordered it, and that made the news. And then the news anchor was telling the story, and he said, I think it's so cute that the little girl said, Alexa, order me a dollhouse. And then like everybody who was listening or who had their TVs on near their own Echo ended up if not ordering them, at least having them queued in their shopping cart.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
I had that flipped. Yep.
Yeah. And I think the
Exactly.
default, according to some I've heard, is that it will put it in the shopping cart, but you can actually enable automatic ordering. So that's something you got to be really careful about if you have kids or anybody who happens to be into practical jokes around your Echo.
Yeah, exactly. So, just be very careful with that, and definitely if you have one of these devices, check the settings because, and especially if you have kids, I know my kids can be mischievous at times. So, something you want to definitely check out. The other thing that I thought was interesting is there was a warrant that was actually granted for Amazon Echo recordings. There was a case, I believe it was a murder in Arkansas, where the person that was accused of this crime had one of these devices in their home, and the police were interested in finding out if it was recording anything in the background or anybody triggered the device to record, the environment. Because when you do summon Alexa, it is always listening because it's listening for that keyword, but it's also recording what you tell it. So, and I believe if you go into the companion mobile application, you can actually review everything you've ever said to your Alexa, which is kind of neat and creepy at the same time. So,
Yes.
Yeah,
That's an interesting case.
Yeah, so and we'll have a link in the show notes, but it's an interesting article because it also talks about how the police were using all of the other types of technology that was in this person's house. For example, they found, they were using like a Nest thermometer, so they were looking at, did the temperature change in the house during the murder, and then did they, the person had a smart meter on their utility for a water meter. And they found that, they could determine if they were using more water because the person tried to cover up the crime and wash blood away from a deck or something. And they could see the usage in the water changed at a certain time of day. And so it's very interesting, I think, from a crime scene perspective, how this technology is kind of changing the way that police and law enforcement, tries to analyze a crime.
Yeah, and it's something that we've got to be vigilant on, that the law, or at least the legal precedent, doesn't kind of squash your rights to privacy, because it's not just that we want to hide these kinds of activities. It's just that a lot of times there's not a good chain of evidence, right? I mean, they may use this evidence and try and use it to prove that you must have committed the murder because you ran the water to wash away this. But there's a whole bunch of other possibilities for how this could have been triggered, or the reasons why you might have used it. So it really is kind of getting down a slippery slope of how this data is likely to be used.
Yeah, and the other thing about this too is Amazon only provided basically past purchase history and other things that Amazon will disclose with a warrant, but they didn't necessarily just give away recordings and things like that because they felt that law enforcement didn't have to have that information by law. So there is definitely some sticky legal things going on that it'll be interesting to see what happens with these types of devices in the future.
Right, but as you mentioned, it's not just Amazon, right? There was the smart water heater, or the water meters, that were also called into play in this case, and it's just calling into question all the technologies that we have around us that are monitoring our activity all the time. So when law enforcement wants to piece together a scene, you have to be aware of all the things that are happening around you.
That's right. And the other thing to mention too is if you're using Google So any types of Google's voice assistant really on your device, or I know they have one actually on the web too, where you can, hook up your microphone to a Google search and say what you want to search for. That information is actually recorded in your Google account, which a lot of people, even myself, didn't realize. So you can actually go in and see those recordings or turn off, the ability for Google to save your voice searches. But that was surprising to a lot of people as well.
Yeah, and I think we don't want to make too many assumptions. I mean, we probably can assume that for the reasons of optimization, so they don't have to have sort of infinite amount of storage space, they likely aren't recording everything in every device's environment, right? They probably are buffering a certain amount of time on an ongoing basis until they hear the words that trigger it, and then they will capture the full statement, and if it can't be interpreted, probably gets sent off or whatever to the mothership for interpretation. But I think we can assume to some extent that they're probably not monitoring everything. But on the other hand, you can't assume that all organizations have figured out the optimal amount of buffering and streaming to the mothership.
Yeah.
So we have to be really careful, especially with newer technologies, on what they are actually capturing.
Exactly. So, if this is something that's concerning to you and you're using, Google or Amazon or any of these services, they all have ways to turn those recordings off or ways to delete those. So I would, definitely recommend going in and changing those settings if that's a concern to you. But, definitely think about that when you're using this new technology.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, it just sort of seems like all this stuff is coming together at once, right? It's starting to make the news
really
on a regular
is.
basis.
It really is. I think just the holidays and just the sales of like the Amazon Echoes have really taken off. So it's more people are using it and more people are talking about it. So I think just naturally, it's just in everybody's head now and in everybody's home.
Yep. And so as we said, if that kind of stuff stresses you out, you might want to go take a cruise.
Or not.
Or not. Yeah, because if you go on a cruise with Carnival, you get a wonderful looking medallion to wear on your wrist.
Yeah, so and we talked about this on the podcast probably a few years ago now, when Disney first proposed those magic bands, as they call them, where and now that's actually by default, when you go to Disney World, you get a magic band because that's the only way now that you can actually get into the park and
to prove you've paid or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that's just commonplace now. I know just the last couple times I was at Disney World over the last few years, we had the magic bands and, we used it to unlock our hotel room and to purchase things. And it was actually pretty convenient. So now this concept has carried over to the cruise line industry. So Carnival announced they're doing something similar. They're calling it a medallion, which is like a wearable, could be like a watch, or could be like, you put it around your neck as a necklace. But again, allowing you to purchase things on the ship, unlock your hotel room, those types of things. And again, whenever this, announcement comes out, a lot of people start, freaking out of like, oh my gosh, it's recording me and it's, it's got my fingerprints and all these
tracking you all over the ship. And,
right. Yeah. Right. And in some cases it is. I mean, it's just like the magic bands where, it can track, where you're at in the park. Like, so when you go to, use your fast pass to get on the Jungle Cruise, right? It knows what time and who you are and when you got on the ride and those types of things. So it's the same thing with Carnival, right? So they're going to use that to track you, and
it's not necessarily a smart device, right? It just needs to know the device's identification number, and it'll track it because it's a whole confined, captured environment. Basically, if they have monitors all over the environment, they can identify your device.
Right. So it's a RFID technology, just like the Magic Bands.
Yeah.
But and it's optional, so they give you the way to opt out. I believe Disney does that as well, but they strongly encourage the Magic Bands. So again, if this is a concern to you, that's something that you can opt out of. But I really think we're going to start seeing more of this, over the next couple of years. I don't know what's next after the cruise lines, but um, it's a very convenient technology, and people seem to like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's got to start somewhere, and it's going to continue.
That's right.
All right. What's next?
So Netgear routers. I just mentioned this as we've talked about router security in the past. We've also talked about how many people just don't update their routers. They'll sit for years, and they could just have a slew of vulnerabilities. And we've talked about some of the exploits that have happened on routers where, your DNS gets hijacked and all of a sudden all of your information is being sent to some other country or an attacker, and you might not know it. Or there's ways to install malware and all of those types of things. But this recent issue at Netgear was really an issue where you could visit a malicious site or click on a link through maybe like a social engineering or a phishing, and it would run commands on your router, essentially allowing an attacker full control of your router to do things like download malware or to send you to bad sites or to, kind of hijack your internet connection. Of course, is a bad thing. But the bigger issue too was that when this was announced, the media instantly said stop using Netgear routers because of this critical vulnerability, and that's a little bit, I'd say, a little bit extreme, especially since there was a researcher that posted a very easy workaround, which solved it until Netgear released a patch. But I just want to caution people that when they see these articles from the media saying stop using it, throw it away, it's dangerous, these attacks are very far and few between. So from a risk perspective, it would be very rare that you would be targeted for this specific attack. But of course, when you read these articles or you see on local newscasts they're talking about this, they kind of take the extreme approach. So just want to caution people of, kind of doing your own research when you see these types of announcements about vulnerabilities and the media is, screaming that the sky is falling. Well, the sky may not necessarily be falling. And I bring that up because this particular router is probably one of the most popular routers that's out there today. In fact, it's the number one router that's sold through Amazon just in the last couple months. So these things are out there and a lot of people have them. So, just want to caution people that it's not a mass panic. And in fact, Netgear did release an update to these routers, which in fact I have one of these routers too, and I did get an email from Netgear with very easy instructions on how to update your router. So if you do have a Netgear Nighthawk, definitely we'll have a link in the show notes on how to update your router and check to see if it is vulnerable to this attack.
Excellent. Very good. So, well, there are other routers though that are still having problems.
What about this D-Link issue?
Yeah, D-Link, it's kind of surprising, but I guess the story is that some time ago they were approached about some security vulnerabilities in their some of their routers. Actually, it was in their IP cameras, I think, and maybe other devices as well, but I think it was primarily the IP cameras, where they were actually not doing everything that they could, or even a reasonable amount, to secure the devices from being attacked or exploited in a way that could harm the owners without their knowledge, right? So basically, it's worked its way up to the Federal Trade Commission. The FTC actually launched a lawsuit, which looks like it was, at what time? 5th of January, so not long ago. And it's pretty extensive and kind of serious. I mean, the things they're accusing, the Federal Trade Commission is accusing D-Link of, look pretty scary. Things
Yeah.
like having failed to take reasonable software testing and remediation measures to protect routers and IP cameras. It is routers too. Against well-known and easily preventable software security flaws, such as hard-coded user credentials and other backdoors, as well as command injection flaws that would allow remote attackers to gain control of the consumer's devices. And there's more. Failed to take reasonable steps to maintain the confidentiality of the private key used to sign their software, which means that it was possible for attackers perhaps to spoof the download or the update that might control the software of the device. And then failing to use free software available since 2008 to secure mobile app login credentials. And instead, they had these credentials stored in the clear in readable text on the user's mobile devices. So that's what the case alleges. We'll see how that goes. But there's some pretty severe accusations here.
Yeah, and I think that's the first time that I've seen the FTC here in the United States actually file a lawsuit against a hardware manufacturer for this type of issue. It's very interesting.
And actually, you read further on, they kind of rub salt in the wound by saying, well, not only did they not do these things, but they were claiming to be secure. Like they had, marketing literature and stuff saying easy to secure, using advanced network security, using 128-bit security encryption, the same kind that's used by e-commerce and banking. Like really misleading if you're trying to be forthright about your security. So that's troubling.
Yeah, that is. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year with any new legislation or what the FTC does with other companies that especially with these Internet of Things devices, right, that are all so popular. It's kind of a
so we'll have a link to that complaint in the show notes just so you can have a look. But our last item today is maybe some good news.
Yeah, Privacy Badger.
Privacy Badger.
Privacy Badger.
If I was the branding guy, I'm not sure I would have chosen that name. Anyway, I wasn't.
Well, yeah. So we've probably mentioned some of the something about the EFF, which stands for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a great organization that is focused on internet privacy and security, mainly privacy, but also they're involved with a whole host of different things. But they do release some interesting tools, and one of them being this browser plugin called Privacy Badger. And the reason I wanted to mention it was they just released a new version of this. They call it version 2. I've been using this for quite a while, just in general, and I find it very useful in blocking ads, as well as kind of what they call invisible trackers. So we all know about browser cookies that just naturally get installed in your browser while you're surfing the web. But now that there's been kind of an increase in like JavaScript technology and other technology that just automatically talks to lots of different third parties while you're browsing or using a site, what Privacy Badger does is it automatically blocks those types of third-party connections, if you will, which are considered invisible trackers. So a lot of times these are going to advertising agencies. They're sending just demographic information about your browser, about your computer, your IP address, other types of things, which can be a concern for your privacy. And Privacy Badger does a nice job of blocking those things. And what I really like about it is that it's very easy to access in your browser. So you just click the icon and it'll actually show you, potentials like, hey, this is blocking. You may want to fully block it. Or they think that, connecting, to a Facebook type of system is okay, but you may also want to block that as well. So it's not too invasive, and it gives you a little bit of customization as well, and information on what is that website actually communicating to in like a really easy to use interface. So
cool. Yeah,
I like it a lot.
Try that out. I've been using something, it's just an ad blocker called uBlock Origin. Do you have any idea sort of what the difference might be between an ad blocker like that and the privacy badger?
I think it's just the one thing about I'm not sure how that other ad blocker is in terms of open source, but Privacy Badger was made for other people to look at the code, and I know there's been some controversy over the years with different ad blockers that have other intentions with their code.
Well,
to
some of them might
money
take payments to allow things to go through that
exactly.
shouldn't, right? So yeah.
Exactly. This is a completely free, ad-free browser plugin since it's coming from the EFF. They make no money on this.
Right.
Interesting. This is so they kind of built this kind of from the ground up. I think they used, the basis of it was like AdBlock Plus. I think if you remember that, like the open source version of that, and they kind of built their own code around it. But I'm not familiar with that other ad blocker. I've used AdBlock Plus in the past as well, and that's been pretty decent, but I really like Privacy Badger a lot.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of the EFF, or if you're not familiar with what it means, it's the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who does a lot of work for privacy and advocates of rights on the internet. Something else I discovered that's at the same site, EFF.org, it's ssd.eff.org. It stands for Surveillance Self-Defense. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have.
So it's got some tools that, for those of us that are paranoid about being tracked and surveilled and monitored at borders and things like that, they have some interesting tools on that page, and they have videos and briefings and tutorials. It's interesting.
Yeah, they're really known for helping people in oppressed countries hear their voice across the internet. So there's obviously we talk about like Iran and other countries that block internet access, and they block things like Twitter. Mm-hmm. The EFF has tools and there's information that you can find out about how to be anonymous on the internet, or be as anonymous as possible, especially if you're in one of these oppressed countries, or you're like a news reporter or someone that is doing research and you want to be more anonymous. Those types of things. They talk a lot about Tor, which we've mentioned on the podcast before, proxies, VPNs, those types of things that are just all good for general use, but definitely if you're concerned about just your privacy in general, I definitely recommend checking out the EFF site for sure. Yeah,
and the one thing that stuck out to me on this ssd.eff.org, if you look under the briefings, one with the briefcase, the last one is of particular interest to me. Things to consider when crossing the U.S. border. I was actually in New York City a couple of weeks ago. Well, just before Christmas, just for a little vacation, and wow, it was quite interesting. The security to get into the States was a lot tougher than the security leaving LaGuardia to go back to Canada. It's crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah, and walking by Trump Tower was crazy. All these satellite news trucks. And another interesting thing I saw when I was there is I was in a hotel not too far from the Trump Tower. It was in Central Park South area. And so if you're familiar with how the streets in New York City are laid out, Trump Tower is, I think, around the corner of 56th Street and 5th Avenue, right? And so the blocks between the avenues are quite long, right? So between 5th and 6th Avenue is like 2.5 times the distance between the street blocks, like 56, 57. And so we're way over on 6th Avenue, 1 block away, but it's quite far. And walking past the intersection at 6th and 56th, I think it is. And at the corner, I saw this metal barricade fences blocking off part of a lane, a traffic lane, and a white tent on the corner, and it had a sign saying "Police Canine Unit in Operation." And I thought, oh, maybe there's like a body or something in the in the white tent. That could be. I don't go to New York very often, but you don't know how often you see bodies on the corners. But anyway, I saw that and I'm wondering what was going on. And over the next couple of days, I'm walking by that same intersection, and I noticed at one time a truck pulls up inside the barricades, stops, and the police come up to it, walk to the driver, say, get out, and then they bring the dog out, and the dog goes around the truck, sniffing for explosives, essentially. And then the dog goes back in the tent. They open up the barricade, and the guy pulls ahead and turns onto 56th Avenue and drives the block down. And that street is actually closed. Like, you can't go down that part of that street. So basically, they're screening out for explosives like a block away from the Trump Tower, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Wow. Yeah. Well, New York's an interesting town for sure. But, I had the opposite experience going into Canada when I was on my trip in September to Algonquin up in Ontario.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so easy getting into Canada. It was like, we showed our passports. They asked, where are you going? And I said, going to Algonquin, doing some camping and some canoeing. And she's like, great, have fun.
Yeah.
And then, very easy to get into Canada. But we definitely got a little more scrutiny when we came back into the U.S. But
I know. We had to take off our boots and belts and jewelry and everything going from Ottawa to New York. But on the way back, going through security, we're not even sure which is the right security line because the guys are standing there joking. And he said, "Oh yeah, come on." Yeah. I said, "Oh, do you have bins or anything? Do we have to put our belts?" "Oh no, just put your stuff on the belt. Go through." We went through, didn't set anything off with my big watch or anything, right? So like, what is going on here? I mean, I guess, they've blocked it all from coming in. They only worry about the stuff that's coming in. So
that's right.
Anyway, that's fun. All right.
You didn't hear about you didn't hear about the wall that we're going to build and Canada's going to pay for it?
It's okay. We've already started on it.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. There's a video on YouTube showing that. It's kind of funny.
Oh, that's good.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for today, and we should have it posted very shortly. So thanks everybody for listening in, and we look forward to another year of great news stories. Hopefully not too scary next time, but
that's right.
Who knows? All right. Thanks everybody.
Thanks for listening.